Hello everyone, my name is Olivia and welcome to another belated Books and Brews. I have not filmed an episode in a while and the books that I have to talk about today are from the beginning of the year, but sit back with your favorite cozy drink while I talk about 5 recent books that I've read that I highly recommend. The list today features literary fiction with one cute cozy graphic novel that I highly recommend, but let's start with the first literary fiction that I read that I really enjoyed, and it is Conversations with Friends. I became a certified Sally Rooney girly in 2024. I read all 4 of her novels this year, and this was the second novel that I read by her. But this is the first novel that she actually wrote. So we follow best friends, Frances and Bobby, who previously dated but are now just friends. And they end up getting interviewed and befriending this woman named Melissa, who is married to a man named Nick. Frances and Bobby get invited into this really luxurious adult world where Melissa and Nick are these people who throw dinner parties and they have very intelligent conversations, and Frances ends up striking a very intimate relationship with Nick behind closed doors. So whenever I pitch Conversations with Friends to people, I always say this is Sally Rooney's messiest book, and I don't mean that negatively. I mean in the way that these characters make really horrible decisions and their lives overall are just incredibly messy because these 4 people who become friends become so entangled with each other that they can barely tell one thread from the other. And we follow Frances, who is befriending Melissa, and she is having a tumultuous relationship with Bobby because they have very different needs and wants in life. But she's also getting closer to Nick. Nick is an actor and he's a very ambiguous type of person. You never really know what's in his head. And he strikes up this relationship with Frances behind his wife's back, and he truly just believes he can get the best of both worlds. He believes that he can have Melissa, but he can also have the exciting, youthful energy of Frances and have his cake and eat some too. And Sally Rooney explores what it's like to be in your 20s through the lens of Frances and Bobby and how they navigate these circumstances in a way that makes you somewhat cringe because you're like, I can't believe they're getting deeper and deeper into this hole. But you can completely understand it because when you're in your early 20s, you make so many different mistakes. And I found this novel really fun to read because I'm a very reserved person, so being able to live vicariously through these really messy characters was so entertaining. My only complaint about this novel is that you can really tell it's Sally Rooney's first novel. You can tell that she's playing with her writing style and her characters, and these characters feel very separate from the reader. I can never truly get a read on Frances and her motivations and why she does certain things and why she thinks certain ways. I felt like she always had this wall up even to the reader where I couldn't truly know her as a person. For normal people, I felt like I knew Connell and Marianne like the back of my hand because they're so introspective and you can understand their motivations even if you don't necessarily agree with it. But with this novel, I felt like the characters were a bit flat because I couldn't get a true read on them. But that's not to say that this novel isn't well written. There are very specific personalities that I would recommend this book specifically to if they've never read a Sally Rooney book. I can tell certain people would absolutely adore this novel, but it's not my favorite Sally Rooney novel. But again, every Sally Rooney novel I have read has been a 4-star or higher. So when I say it's not my favorite Sally Rooney novel, I just have other favorite Sally Rooney novels. And yeah, Conversations with Friends, I had a blast with. I think I read it in like 2 sittings. It's a very easy novel to dive into. I think it would be a really fun novel to take on vacation, to read on the beach, to really dive into and just explore how messy these 4 characters are because wow. So messy in the best way possible. Let's move on to the second messy story that I have to recommend because it pairs so well with Conversations with Friends, and it is The Guest by Emma Cline. I listened to The Guest on audiobook and had a blast listening to it because it follows the story of this woman who is basically just scamming her way through Long Island and trying to maintain this level of luxury that she's lied herself into into, while also having her life completely fall apart at the seams throughout the entire narrative. So at the beginning of the novel, we follow Alex, who has recently gotten into a fight with the older man that she was dating, and he no longer trusts her and tells her she has to leave his mansion and she's no longer welcome. So that is the starting point of the novel, and from there onwards we follow Alex as she is trying to continue living in Long Island by manipulating and lying to these men along the way in order to let her stay over at their houses. The Guest is definitely not for everyone. It's a very polarizing book. You either love it or you hate it, and I just happen to have a really good time with it because I think you just have to get on board with how terrible Alex is and how she really just wants to live in luxury, and she will lie and cheat and manipulate her way across town and back in order to maintain that life. She's the personification of that pearl quote, "I will not accept a life I do not deserve," and she truly believes that she deserves all this wealth even though she never did anything to actually work towards that wealth. And what makes this book so fun for me is that it feels so anxiety inducing. You're on the edge of your seat wondering when she's going to get caught, and there's a certain level of tension and worry within you while you're reading this entire novel where you are like, when is the shoe going to drop? What is going to happen next? When is she finally going to get arrested for all the lies that she has built up along the way? This is most definitely a story about a woman who is deeply unlikable. She is not meant to be liked at all. She's not even meant to be truly understood. You are just along the ride for this 1 week in her life while she is doing all these terrible acts, and you are just there to watch and witness and really just enjoy her ruining everything in her wake. And if that's not the type of story that you like, if you want to learn more about her motivations and why she is like this, I feel like you would be disappointed. But if you don't mind being thrust into a story knowing it's just like a vignette of someone's life, then I think you would enjoy The Guest. I just found it to be so fun. So let's talk about that graphic novel that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, because that's like the one outlier in this entire Books and Brews, and it is the Anne of Green Gables graphic novel. I've never read Anne of Green Gables before. I never knew anything about the story besides the fact that she was an orphan and she got adopted and she's a little bit quirky, but I decided to pick up Brenna Thumler's graphic novel version of Anne of Green Gables and fell in love with the story. So many people recommend that I watch Anne with an E, which is a Netflix show adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, and reading this graphic novel really inspired me to want to start the show finally, because I fell in love with Anne. Anne is such a quirky, adorable main character who has a very large flair for the dramatics. She's adopted by an older brother and sister duo who really want a child to take care of, and they initially wanted a son and they were given Anne, and they were initially a little bit disappointed by it because they really did want a son to help work on the land with them, but they decided to take Anne in, and she changes their life for the better because she really livens up the world around them. She's so imaginative and she's so quirky, and we watch her as she journeys and she makes friends along the way and she gets into hijinks, and she's a very rambunctious type of character who's always getting into mischief, but in the best way possible. She's not necessarily bratty, she's just so full of life, and you can see that through this graphic novel. And one of my favorite aspects of it is the art, because Brenna Thumler has a really beautiful art style, and she brought this story to life in such a beautiful way. Every time I turned the page on my iPad, I was admiring the landscape and the beauty of the whole entire story. And I think adapting this specific story into a graphic novel is so clever, because not only do you get to fall in love with Anne and you get to see her emotions on her face and you just get to see her grow up as a character, but you also get to admire the landscape of Canada and just how beautiful the overall setting is. So if you're looking for a very cute and cozy graphic novel to read, I would highly recommend this. Even if you've never read Anne of Green Gables before like me, I still think that you will fall in love with this story. I also read Beautiful World, Where Are You? And this is without a doubt my favorite Sally Rooney book of all time. So we follow two best friends in this book. We follow Alice and we follow Eileen. Alice meets up with a man that she met on a dating app named Felix, and they end up forming a relationship with one another, while Eileen is getting over a breakup and slings back into flirting with Simon, a man that she has known since childhood. So we follow Alice and Eileen as they live their separate lives, but they update each other on their circumstances through emails. So this feels like a love letter to lockdown, where you are separated from the people that you love, but you maintain this connection through the internet, and you update each other on your lives, and you muse and you share your thoughts, and you follow these four characters as they interconnect over time. And it is one of the most hopeful, beautiful novels that I have ever read. It's one of the few novels that I have picked up that made me want to weep, because I was so grateful for the friends in my life, the life I live, and just being able to exist on this earth. And that's a very large feat to do as someone who's very jaded by the entire concept of like existing. It explores the beauty of friendship and the fact that no matter how much distance and time separates you between your friend, you still have this beautiful connection with one another, and you still feel so seen by one another. And it also explores self-worth and self-compassion and what it's like to come home to yourself and realize what you truly want in life, because we start out with these characters feeling very lost. They don't have a true sense of purpose. They don't really know what they want out of their existence. But over time, we see them sort of come home to themselves, and we see them settle in their knowing and knowing what they want out of life and knowing what they want their future to look like. Beautiful World, Where Are You feels like Sally Rooney's most positive novel. Her other novels feel a little bit heavier in their messaging and in their exploration of themes, but this one feels like a love letter to life itself. It feels like she took the worry and the fear that we had during the pandemic and reminded us of the beauty of the human connection and existence, and being able to write to your friend on an email to tell them about your life. It is such a touching story in a way that like I truly cannot describe. I feel like the more you like a novel, the more difficult it is to be able to describe how you feel about it, and that's how I feel about Beautiful World, Where Are You? I'm gonna read you a quote from the story because I highlighted this forwards and backwards. Like, it was truly such a stunning novel. So one quote says, "Life is more changeable than I thought. I mean, a life can be miserable for a long time and later happy." And I think that's like the thesis of Beautiful World, Where Are You? You can start out in a really dark place and a place of uncertainty and loneliness, and that's certainly where Alice and Eileen come from. But over time, you will connect with other people, you will find a sense of purpose, you will settle back into a routine and a sense of safety, knowing that you have this air of stability. And Beautiful World, Where Are You explores that so beautifully, and it also explores the changing of a friendship, because Alice and Eileen no longer have the ability to live close to one another, and that's why they have to send these letters and emails between one another, and you can see them clinging on to their friendship. And it does change over time, as friendships always do, but it changes into something so much more beautiful, where they may not necessarily agree on the same things and their politics and the way that they view life, but they still love each other. Beautiful World, Where Are You certainly does remind you that the world is beautiful and you have to find the beauty within it. And the beauty can look different for each person, but as long as you find your beauty, that's all you can do in this world. And this book, I will always reread this. Like, I will always come back to this book because it really made a home in my heart and was the book that I needed right when I read it. And it was so beautiful. One of the few novels I've read where I fell in love with it so much that I almost started crying because I loved it so much. So thank you, Sally Rooney. Like, you really are that girl. Like, every time you publish a new novel, I'm like, you're the girl. You're that girl. I love you. The last novel that I want to talk about is Thirst. This is a Latina vampire novel set in Argentina, following a vampire woman and a human woman. So we follow both of their point of views. We initially follow the vampire in the beginning of the story. We follow her from when she was a human, and then she was initially turned into a vampire, and then we follow her life onwards. And then we go all the way up to the present time, where we follow the human woman who is dealing with such loneliness and darkness in her life. And overall, this entire story is the connection between this vampire and this human, and how they are very different from one another, but they do have this shared bond, and that is loneliness. Thirst is a beautiful novel because the prose is delicious. It's slow moving, it's gothic, it's so lush. Like, the moment I started this novel, I felt like I was thrust into this gorgeous gothic setting in Argentina, and it was so vivid in my mind. Every sentence was so beautifully constructed, and it's a very short novel too. I feel like I read it very quickly, but like the moment I locked in, I was like there. I was in the setting. I felt so connected to these women. If you aren't a fan of slow moving novels and a monologue heavy story, this is not the book for you. Similar to that of The Guest, I feel like these two novels are very polarizing. You either love it or you hate it, because they're for a very specific type of reader, and I think that Thirst is for the people who love just lush landscapes and being so deep into a character's head, because we really get to muse over what it means to be a vampire, what it means to be lonely, because being a vampire inherently is a lonely existence. You don't have a lot of people to connect with, and the people that you do connect with are afraid of you because you're a vampire. So I love the way that we explored this through the eyes of two women, because being a woman is somewhat a lonely experience. Sometimes you don't feel connected to those around you, and there's so many different circumstances that can make a woman lonely. And to explore it through the eyes of a vampire and a human woman is so clever. And I love seeing the connection between this vampire and this woman, and how they share a bond with one another. And while I did say it's a sapphic vampire novel, do keep in mind that the romance is like so light. Like, it is just sprinkled on. It's not the central part of the story. It's really about these two women's lives and how they eventually intersect, because the vampire is so old, and we eventually see her timeline line up with the woman's life. And you also get to see the progression of Argentinian politics as well, because we start out maybe like in the 1800s, and then we go up to present day. So you get to see the shift of society and technology through the eyes of this vampire, and I just thought it was so beautifully written. It's definitely a book that you can read during autumn time. It is lush, it is so atmospheric. It is the perfect book to read in a short amount of time because it's so quick, but it packs such a punch in the entire narrative, and I really loved it. I definitely want to add a copy to my collection because I read it through my library on ebook, and I was highlighting that backwards and forwards, and I really want a copy for my collection. But those are the 5 books that I have recently read, and I loved them all. I loved them all in different ways. Conversations with Friends and The Guest were so messy and entertaining. Beautiful World, Where Are You reminded me of the beauty of life. Anne of Green Gables inspired me to want to read the classic novel and also watch the Netflix show finally. And Thirst overall was a beautiful vampire novel that I fell in love with. Based on these recommendations, recommend me some books that you think would be up my alley down below in the comments. If you want to follow me anywhere else on social media, all my links are down below. If you want to connect with me elsewhere, I post a lot on Instagram about what I'm currently reading on my stories. So if you want to know that ahead of time before these Books and Brews videos, I post a lot over there if you want to follow me there. If you have not subscribed so already, be sure to do so. And if you have stayed this far in the video, leave a tea emoji so we can see who stays for the longest in all my videos. If you do, I appreciate it, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!